Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, YouTubers. This is Jerry Diamond with How to Get Out of Babylon and Flat Earth Homeland. Moving right along here at a snail's pace. Last topic, and I might be able to do this in 15 minutes. I want to talk about Cateris paribus. I did. In the documentary Beyond Off Grid, Michael Bunker, they do give him a very brief thing where I barely caught it. The words Cateris paribus were used, and that was it. Nobody that watches that documentary would it mean anything to them, or would it give them a clue that it is important. So, and it's just a matter of not criticizing the documentary or the producer or director, because I mean the guy has vision. He wants to do. He would like to do a documentary about me and the OzArk Plateau, kind of an end-time science fiction, Christian-based science fiction. So, not knocking it. They crammed a lot of information into that documentary. Get it, watch it, listen to it over and over again. It is a very, very, very packed documentary. So the next issue, the last issue here was going to be food, and so I wanted to just, all things being equal, or here I want to talk about this. What about a poor, backward society dependent on agriculture for survival? I mean, this is really funny because a poor, backward society dependent on agriculture for survival. In the event of the end of the world scenario, it's going to be a very rich, very wealthy, very highly advanced in comparison to everybody else society, because they're not dependent on agriculture for survival, or they were dependent on it, but basically they have it under control. They have it managed. Okay, Cateris paribus. There came a point in time in the history of Cuba, following the collapse of the Soviet Union. The U.S. embargoed them. They lost more than half of their oil imports, and yet they survived. They started farming with oxen, who plow and fertilize and urinate and water the garden because they punch holes in the soil to collect rainwater. And so Cuba turned into a very vibrant organic farming culture. The history of the Dacha movement. Food production, okay? The Russian word dacha, they might probably be a hard K, I don't know, Dacha movement. The word means to give. The English word farm means to take, to tax. Okay, at the bottom there you see Vladimir Megre's Ringing Cedars of Russia books. The first volume that come on the history of the concept of a Dacha movement. Okay, I'm just going to go through this. You can pull up this website and read it. It's the based on the Ringing Cedars of Russia. But what you have is the idea of the government in Russia giving land to people. Okay, and they're not to be taxed on the land. The food that they grow on the land is not to be taxed. And in those books, this woman Anastasia, who is like this, woman that lives up in the taiga, likes and respects Dachniks, and using them as an example demonstrates how the country can survive during periods of extreme crisis. Indeed, at the moment of the collapse of the Soviet Union, when the exchange rate of the national currency had been devalued by 10 times, the savings of the population had vanished, and the government had nothing with which to pay wages. The people were not left hungry. There was no general uprising, and the country did not collapse completely, thanks to the fact that the majority of the population had parcels of land under cultivation, parcels of land called dachas. Okay, so there's a lot of text here. I'm not going to read it all. I'm just going to go through this. So, so these little communities of little farms started springing up around the cities. Here's an interesting one I didn't know. At first, the parcels were transferred through companies to their workers and office employees to use for an indefinite period after the employees had worked at the company for 5 years from the time of receiving the parcel. But subsequently, an obligatory condition of cultivating the land was added, otherwise the land was taken away. In other words, you got to grow something to grow food. Major construction was forbidden. In other words, you could put up a building, a home. It was not to be turned into a industrial complex or a manufacturing facility or whatever. The land that was allocated was infertile, overgrown with weeds, and this is the land that the Dachniks transformed into blossoming gardens over the course of many years. Some beautiful pictures of some produce here. The peak was in the 80s when problems with food became evident in the country. In the conditions of a total food shortage, the dacha became the means for survival. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, land passed completely over to private ownership. The various types of conditions and restrictions fell away. But in the new capitalist economy, henceforth, nothing was given away free of charge. Okay, so they started making money on their food. That's okay. As long as the government didn't tax them, I think they're okay. So, not even going to try to go into how they were set up. They're a hectare, 2.5 acres, basically 1/4 of 10 acres, a little square, and they would put in trees as borders instead of fences. Very, very, very productive. During the food shortage, people gave their surpluses to each other, and as a result, a single family accumulated a variety of preserved vegetables and fruit. On expiry of the best before date, the surpluses were thrown out. Yeah, I'll bet. It should be mentioned that Dachniks also love collecting wild mushrooms, berries in the adjacent forest. Various preparations are made from these delicacies for the winter. 40 million families to date, about 120 million people, 85% of the population eat products from their own dacha. So I heard that statement. It's somewhere between close to 80% of the food consumed in Russia is from these little farms, and that's apparently pretty good support for that. So there's different settlements. And this is from Ringing Cedars of Russia.org. Here's a little settlement called Rodolad. A bunch of people got together and said, hey, let's go out in the country and start growing food and build us some houses and live out in the woods. 7 points of the community, basic principles. So these are pictures of some of the books. That's the first one, Anastasia. There's 2 different sets of them, different book covers. Interestingly enough, this is the Leonid. Yeah. Sharashkin. Leonid, I think it's Sharashkin. Yeah, up there. He came to Missouri, went to University of Missouri, Columbia, and he stayed here. The Russian language is really a language of the heart. It's of the same age as Sanskrit, so when you translate from this language of the heart into English language, which is very pragmatic, very well structured, very logical, it's really the language of the mind. You cannot just be translating words or even meanings of words. You need to be translating the experiences, the images, the feelings that stand behind the words, and to rework the translation until the energy and vibration of the translation match that of the original. So, anyway, he's a pretty cool guy. And quite some time ago, I don't know, you can look on the date on this, wherever I did them, but part 1 of 3, I have a message for people around the world who would desire to live in peace. And this was a cover, like up here in the top right. Part 2 of 3, I used that thing as a cover, as a thumbnail. Because basically, I mean, I was saying, if you want to garden, if you want to, learn healing, come here to the OzArk Plateau. Part 2 of 3 there. Probably 3 of the worst videos I've ever done. In one of them, I had the song going, Where Oceans Rise, Where Feet May Fail, When Oceans Rise. And so years later, I come to find out that I was at a biowell meeting, and I've said this before in another video, I know, so I'm just going to do it real quick, but I was told by one woman there who had read 5 of the books. I'd read all 9 of them at the time. The instructor had read 2 of them, and the visiting Russian the professor, the physicist who had invented and developed this biowell, this diagnostic system, medical diagnostic system, did not seem to be aware of the dolmen stones, these grave sites in Galeznik, Russia, that Anastasia talks about. And they're very famous. People go visit them all the time. Anyway, it was bizarre. So I come to find out that this woman tells me that Ava, Missouri, which is right about where the cursor is there, it's a little bit east of Springfield. If I could make that closer, I could maybe expand it, but I'm not going to. I can't even try because it's just a screenshot. But anyway, this woman told me that the Ringing Cedars of Russia movement worldwide has designated Ava, this is quote-unquote from her mouth, Ava, Missouri, as the center, crosshair, of the safest place, region on Earth. Okay. She just happens to be quoting me almost verbatim, even though she'd never met me before. That's I've made that statement. Ava, Missouri is on the crosshairs at the very center of the OzArk Plateau and is the safest region on the planet. So, one of those things. Pretty weird. I've never, run across confirmation of that again. I'm rolling here, and I'm sorry, I apologize, but my lungs were here. Let's do it. Latin, respice finum, that means consider the end. And it's from a longer saying that says, whatever you do, do wisely and consider the end or consider the outcome. Okay? My soul, sit thou a patient looker on, judge not the play before the play is done. Her plot hath many changes every day, speaks a new scene. The last act crowns the play. So, this is where I'm tired. I would like some help. I don't feel that I have the option to quit what I'm doing. I don't believe that I have that I would be convinced to do that. And this is one reason why. The game's not over. The fat lady hasn't sung. The shit has not hit the fan. The balloon hasn't gone up yet. I think it's about to. But what I'm doing is going to have a huge effect on life and in a lot of people's lives. So I'm going to keep doing it. It would sure be nice to have some help. So, I'm thinking right there, I'm going to cut this one, and that poem there is by Francis Quarles, Francis Quarles, Quarles. So I want to pause this one just because it's about 15 minutes, and then see if I feel like doing another one because my voice is going. So, this is Jerry Diamond. If you're listening to this, you are the remnant.